I'm going to say how to find a motivated seller so that you can learn how I found that great deal that actually made me $100,000. I gave you a little hint and said I called a tax delinquent list and somebody who did not pay their taxes. Now, in truth, there's lots of different ways that you could find people who are motivated to prefer speed and convenience over selling their house for retail. A great example was I was interviewing Michael Breedlove today, who was a pastor, and he was just a little bit burned out with the low income you make in that profession. He wants to build so much money in his personal income that he can then plant a church, something he's very passionate about. And so he had just done 2 deals when I talked to him today. And he said, first of all, he posted on Facebook and he just posted, say, hey, I buy rundown houses. And he had the confidence to do that because he attended real estate meetup in the city where he lived, and he'd found somebody who's actually doing this business. And he knew that if he needed help selling that deal, he could then contact his buddy and help get that deal sold. That's exactly what he did. They made $15,000 wholesaling it on a 2-week timeline. And he actually split that 50% each, which is very common. So they each made $7,500. So that was one way, as well as the tax delinquent list. But man, there's just lots of different ways. I'm going to give you guys the full list. And so then I'll help you organize which ones would be best to tackle first. So number one on my list is actually driving for dollars. That is looking for rundown properties. You don't look at anything else. Just look and see if they're rundown. And that's what you look for. Number two is that tax delinquent list. Every county publishes this. And you could also find it in the DealMachine app, which is what I created. Not trying to sell you guys, but you could find it in either place. Get a 7-day trial of DealMachine as well. I've got a special code for you. It's going to be 101 because you're in the house flipping 101 course. And I'll put a special link there as well to get you guys 40 extra pieces of mail that you could send out from the app. Number three is liens. There's multiple types of liens. And what this means is one of them is like a mechanic's lien, for example. So if somebody comes to a property and they replace the water heater, but then the homeowner doesn't pay for the water heater and the guy already did the work, that guy could show evidence of the work he did, contact the city and say, I'm going to put a lien on this property. So if they ever try to sell it, I get my $1,200 first before anyone else gets paid. That is a lien. So people who have liens are generally people in financial distress, right? So that's one reason why they may just prefer to sell that house, even though it's not in good condition, and prefer speed and convenience to get out from under bills that have deadlines. And so liens could be mechanics lien, builders, contractors, subcontractors, etc. Number four is a judgment lien. So that would be they had like a lawsuit. They didn't have the money to pay for the outcome. And so now they have a lien on their house from that judgment. Five would be a federal tax lien with somebody who doesn't pay their federal taxes. Number two, going back to number two, tax delinquent means they didn't pay their property taxes. Number five is federal taxes. Six is they may be a part of a homeowners association. They have dues. If they don't pay the HOA dues, the homeowner association puts a lien on your property. Seven is code violations. So that could be their grass is too tall and the city has to come and cut the grass. And once you actually get the city cutting your grass, that is a code violation. So they put that on a public list and you could find that list and reach out to those owners to see if they'd like to sell their house. Number eight is another code violation for having work done without a permit. I actually had an out-of-state investor who lived in Alaska that was fixing a house right next door to me in Indianapolis. She had this big yellow sign on the window and the house was just sitting out there, brand new wood, but no actual roof. And it was just getting rained on month after month. I contacted her. She was throwing her hands up because she said, oh, my contractor, he did this work without getting a permit. And I don't know the details of how to do it. And my contractor just buzzed off and didn't worry about fixing the problem. Oh, it's just been such a headache. And I ended up buying that property from her for $90,000, finished fixing it up for another $90,000. And then it was worth $250,000. So it's still a rental property I hold today and cash flows and continues to appreciate based on where it's at. Number nine is another code violation. So that's if there's lots of trash or debris. It's just a sign that something's not quite right. If they're making money from the house, it's probably going to look nice. They're probably going to be collecting rent. People are going to be living in it. And if it's just like a dump, probably something's not right. They might be willing and interested in selling that house. 10 is a pre-foreclosure. So every actual courthouse. So every city has a courthouse. They have a bulletin board and they say these people didn't pay for their mortgage this month. And in Texas, the process happens real quick in 30 days. Other states, it's a bit longer. But you can go to that bulletin board and you could look at the posted actual documents about whose house will be auctioned off if they don't pay their mortgage. So you could reverse drive for dollars to those addresses, knock on their door, ask if they want to sell their house. A lot of people don't really care about their credit score as much, which would obviously be trashed if they fully get foreclosed on. But a lot of people prefer knowing where they're going to lay their head at night. They aren't paying attention to when that court date is or when exactly the house will be taken away from them is unclear. But you could provide them an offer, sell the house. They would have money and ability to go move in somewhere that's more affordable for them. And that's a big motivator I found. Number 11 is pre-probates. That means the owners died and there's no will. So the other family members will be inheriting that house. You could find pre-foreclosures as well as the courthouse. It's also in DealMachine. Pre-probates also a filter in DealMachine. 12 is for sale by owner. So a lot of people list their house for sale on Zillow. They sit on the market for a while. They're willing to actually accept a much lower offer than what they've listed it as some time has passed on. 13 is an eviction list. So you can get that one. It's people who have just had an eviction, which can be a big headache. Maybe their house got trashed and they're totally done. Maybe they were an accidental landlord, inherited that property, and they don't want to be a property manager. That's a great person who's motivated to just get that off their hands. 14 is water shutoffs. If they haven't paid for their water bill, they might be in financial and life trouble. 15 is arrest records. If you've been put in jail for a long time, who's going to take care of your house? Maybe you don't have family or friends to look after it. Maybe the city's cutting your grass, giving you code violations at the same time. 16 is 100 plus day old listings on the market. If a house isn't selling, sometimes in my experience, I'll send offers at 70% of list price and they won't all get accepted. But if I send 100, maybe one will, and 70% of list price may save me like $90,000. And then I can fix it up a little bit and make a profit. 17 is houses listed for rent. If they're listed for rent for a long time, maybe that landlord's tired because he's not making money from that property forever. He may just want to sell it and get rid of it. He's got bills after all. Doesn't matter if it's rented or not. He's still got to pay the mortgage. 14 is foreclosures. So that means it's definitely going to be auctioned. And in order to buy those properties, you need to have a cashier's check in your back pocket. And you need to go to the auction to find those. Here, those all lists are available for free. And again, they are available in DealMachine as well for convenience. These other lists are actually lists that you would have to pay for or are also included in DealMachine, but you can't find them publicly. It's just a privilege of paying for a service like DealMachine. So vacant homes, 20 expired listings means it didn't sell with a realtor with high equity, which means they could do a deal lower than what they were asking for without having to pay off like a big loan. 21 is tired landlords. They've owned a property over 15 years. 22 is senior owners, people who are over 65. 23 is zombie properties, means it's vacant and going through the foreclosure process. That means you got to track down where the owner's at, but DealMachine gives you the contact info so you could do that. 24 is absentee owner. For years and decades, that's been the basic advice that everyone hits. So it's generally like a big wide list. It requires a lot of outreach and it's kind of a saturated list, so you don't get as good of results. And then out-of-state owner is like absentee owner, which means they don't live in the property, but it's even better because they're living out of state, far away from that property, which is like my Utah orthodontist example as well. So in closing, this might be confusing at first because you're like, man, I actually have 25 options. Where do I start? But I wanted to explain all the options in a little bit more detail so that if you heard them later, you wouldn't be sidetracked with shiny object syndrome. I actually gave you these in the order that you should approach them. So the very first thing is you should go find 100 houses driving for dollars that look run down in your area. And that would be my recommended place to start. Once you've done that, then you should pull the tax delinquent list. And with those lists combined, you should do some sort of mail campaign or approach to call them, how to reach out to somebody who may be motivated to sell their property at a discount. So we've got several different ways that are popular in the industry. I've been a real estate investor for 8 years, and here's what I've found to be true. We actually all go to these masterminds and webinars, and we tell everybody what's working well. It was direct mail, and then everybody came to these webinars and masterminds and said, we're getting the best deals from direct mail. Everybody needs to do this direct mail strategy. And then everybody slowly adopts it. And as more and more people do it, more and more people talk about it at their masterminds. And then more and more people do it, it becomes less effective. And then somebody says, we're getting great amount of leads from pay-per-click marketing. That's when you go to Google, it's the top few ad results and people type in sell my house fast. And then the pay-per-click goes to your website, for example. I'm not saying go set up a website, because what happens is now people do more and more pay-per-click, and then it becomes less and less effective. But now direct mail starts working again, and the cycle continues. There's not a lot of new things under the sun, but every once in a while, something groundbreaking does happen, and it totally provides an opportunity for early adopters to get a low-hanging fruit. This happened in recent history 2 years ago with text messaging. It's illegal to robo-blast text everybody. Consumers don't want it. The phone companies don't want their consumers to have to deal with it. And so somebody built a tool, though, that got around the law, and it would send one text message with each click. So people started paying to use the software and have somebody just click, 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 which eliminated the robocalling legality of that and allowed them to do it for free. It worked like gangbusters. People were getting so many deals for only $100 of marketing, paying somebody to click and send text messages. It was great. And we all talked about it at our masterminds. And then all of a sudden, so many people were doing it. It wasn't illegal, but it became less effective because consumers were getting too many texts. It didn't work as well. And then the phone companies started labeling things as spam, and they would not even deliver text messages that looked like some type of spam text. And so it just way less effective today. But the people who early adopted in that first year, man, did they get some smoking deals. They got that low-hanging fruit. Now their bank accounts are sitting stacked fat full of cash, and they have that to ride and buy more rental properties, which generates more in passive income and actually provides those assets that could pay for fun liabilities like a nice car, et cetera. So I wanted to give you guys the full spectrum of stuff. We've got cold calling, direct mail, door knocking, and those are the main key ones, right? We talked about pay-per-click. We talked about having a website. We talked about having, you could have search engine optimized on that website. But what I'm going to recommend that you guys do is you stick to one thing. It's really going to be door knocking, cold calling, or mail. And let's face it, the door knocking is pretty time consuming and it's very nerve wracking. So let's throw that one out. The direct mail is a decent option if you don't have time. But many of you here may have limited budgets. So I'm going to suggest calling, which costs like 4 cents a minute when you're using a dialer. Now you might ask, why would I use a dialer instead of my cell phone? Well, in order to get one deal, you need to make about 1,000 calls. You can make 160 calls an hour with a dialer. You don't have to actually punch the numbers. Plus, if somebody calls you back, you want it tracked in your software that you made that call so you know who's actually calling back about what property, what you talked about previously, etc. And when you do have that conversation, the AI listens and it gives you notes. And if you ever wonder what to say, there's a button you could press while the AI is listening. Hey, what do I say next? And it will give that information to you right there, eliminating the scared feeling you have of just picking up that phone and calling. Man, I'm reading this book called Sell the Way You Buy. It's written by somebody who's in charge of sales at Salesforce, the big CRM company. And they said from 2009 to 2019, people responded and bought after 4.7 touch points. Now it's 9.4 touch points. So it's over doubled how many actual touch points are required before someone responds to you. So if you're dealing with properties that are distressed, you need to find at least 500 of those distressed properties and send mail 6 times each. If you're making calls, you need to call 1,000 people, which will take you about 12 hours of actual calling in order to get one appointment. And since you're new, it may take a few appointments to get a deal, but it's just that easy to get somebody on the phone, have a simple conversation, and ask. We're going to talk about what to say on a seller appointment when you're at their house. In the previous video, we talked about reaching out to owners via direct mail and cold calling. And if they say, yes, I do want to sell my house, the next thing that you want to do is set an appointment to meet them at the house, whether that's a call you're getting from direct mail or that's a call you made outbound and you hear the person wants to sell. So now we've got to go on the appointment. And there's really 3 simple objectives is One is to be very curious about them. I was helping my friend Camille go to a seller appointment where we met the seller's deceased mom's house that he had had for 3 years after her death. And he was opening it up and walking us through the house. And we said, hey, we'd really like to go have you show us the house, etc. And when we got to the garage, he said, well, these are all my mom's plates. We had artistic plates. She loved to collect plates. They're all painted plates. I thought they'd be worth a lot of money, but I've spent 3 years realizing they're not worth too much. And then we moved on, and I was kind of nudging Camille, ask him about the plates, because it was obviously really important to his mom, and his mom's obviously really important to him. And he's sentimental about the house because it reminds him of his mom. So that's a huge opportunity to be curious, even if you think, well, these plates have nothing to do. They have everything to do with it, right? He hasn't sold this house in 3 years because of the plates. She could have asked anything. And it's important that the questions are genuine, but like, what are you, how did you determine they're not worth anything? How do you know? And you're not trying to challenge him on his belief, but you're truly trying to find more information about something that's very important for him. I've had multiple sellers tell me that I wasn't the highest price. And this is actually the second rental property that I ever purchased. And the guy was selling it. He was a fireman and it was kind of run down. He was selling all his properties so he could start his dream, which was a bar outside of Indianapolis. And so he received 2 offers. My offer was not the highest price, but he and his wife thought long and hard about it. They did a little research about me online and found a random video about me talking about the importance of leadership training. He said, we just felt good about giving someone like you who's young and ambitious, and we like the chance to, do well and build a good future with this house, even though we're taking a hit to give this to you rather than the other guy. And so that was when I learned it's really important to totally be curious about the person. It's not about the house. It is about the house, but it's not about the house, more about the person. And then, of course, while you're at the house, you should really just take photos of everything. I actually asked, here's one of my houses on Grandview Drive where it was actually another individual who's, I noticed the house looked really, really run down. You could see like the gutters falling off here. And that's the son's car. Both his parents lived here, but his last one had passed away, and they had debts on their estate that he needed to settle within 30 days. And so this house was in no condition to sell as is. I mean, you could tell it was just in really bad shape. Certainly couldn't fix it up in 30 days. Lots of peeling paint. The worst part was actually, I had to update the whole thing on the wiring to be compliant with modern laws and regulations for electricians. And the worst thing was that had a lot of smoke. They were cigarette smokers. And you'll see here in a second that you want to take photos so that you can calculate expenses and get bids without walking lots of other contractors through the house. And of course, if you're going to wholesale the property, you actually do want to advertise the house. So if you're going to sell it as is, you want lots of photos because then the buyers can see that and it'll be better for your advertising. So basically, you want to be curious and you want to take photos. That's what you want to accomplish on the appointment. And in order to, so here's where the photos showed the smoke damage. I didn't realize it till I moved one of the paintings. And I'm so glad when you actually have a house under contract, because we got under contract and then I discovered the smoke later once I got in there. And I was like, oh man, I didn't know that. It's going to take at least $10,000 more because you can't just paint over smokes and get rid of the smell. So we needed like a very special high dollar product to not let that smell seep through, or a budget to replace the drywall. So it was originally locked up at $55,000. And I said, I really want to do this deal, but I can only do it at 44. Would you like to continue? And we'll re-sign the contract. And he said, yes. That's not what you want to do. But taking lots of photos will help you analyze what the repairs actually are whenever you get back to your house. And I like to give an offer within 24 hours. And that's what I tell them since I was kind of new at this at the time and didn't feel confident in giving an offer I could stand by right there. So when you're on the appointment, that's all you got to do is be curious and take photos. And on the next video, I'll show you guys how to estimate the rehab costs. You don't want to get your initial offer price wrong because then you won't be able to flip the paper and sell the contract to another investor. Nobody will want to buy it because it's not a good enough deal. If you get the offer price right, the lower you can get it, the more you can make on a single deal, the faster you can sell the deal. So I know we're all wondering, if you're doing this for the first time, how am I going to sell the deal? I'm going to cover it in a future video, but this is why the offer price is important. And it's not as hard as you think. So we're going to determine the offer price. The first step is to get comparable sales. Those are houses that look very similar to the shape and size and arrangement, but are in perfect condition and recently sold on the retail market. So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to show you guys on this screen. Here's one of the houses we called earlier. So if you want to see what this house would be worth in perfect condition, click on the comps tab. And right away, I see $10 million. That's not right. But I'm noticing one of these houses sold for, they were recorded with the county at $300 million. So it's obviously part of like a really big portfolio. So I'll just click it once to remove that. Now it's removed from the list. And I could take a look closely at any one of these individual houses and actually see the value is about 171. It's pretty close to the estimated value that we gave. So if you want to know the inner workings of what the comps is doing, it's looking for the last 6 months, plus or minus like 200-300 square feet within a 1 mile radius. It's looking for 3 bedrooms. 4 baths, which is similar to this property. And it's not hard and fast on those rules. That's why they're not totally filled out, but that's exactly how the comps would work as a rough estimate of what this house would be worth in actual perfect condition. So let me go back to my slides and I will show you guys exactly what to do next. So now we got 170 for your repair costs. You want to estimate $20 a square foot for carpet and paint. You want to estimate $35 per square foot if it also needs a kitchen redo and bath redo. And you want to estimate $50 a square foot if it needs carpet paint, kitchens and baths, and also a new roof and water heater, mechanicals and stuff like that. So that's your general repair costs. You're going to plug it in a formula. So offer price equals ARV, which is 170, and then 30% of the ARV. What is that? Quick math. I'll get my calculator out here, and I'll say 170,000 times 0.3, which is 51,000. So we got 170 minus 50, which is 120, and then minus the repair costs. This was a 1,400 square foot house. And so let's just assume that it needs carpet paint, kitchens, and bathrooms updated. So we'll do $35 a square foot times 1,400 square feet, which is $49,000. So again, our ARV is 170 minus 50,000 for the profit margin. That's the ARV times 30%. And then minus the repair costs, which is also 50,000. So our offer price on this house would be $70,000. And your wholesale fee, if you're wholesaling, would be taken from this part of the equation, which was the profit margin, which was $50,000. So your wholesale fee should be 5 to 10% of the total ARV, which would mean on this type of deal, you could make like a $10,000 fee. And that would be a good expectation for you guys. So in more expensive markets like San Diego, obviously the deal is going to be way more expensive. It will generally, just so you have realistic expectations, take at least 3 times as much marketing and money and time for you to even find that deal in the first place. But it does have a bigger payoff. I just tell you guys that so you have proper expectations. And that's how you calculate your offer price.
Thanks for listening to the DealMachine Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please leave us a review and follow along wherever you're listening to your podcast.